Welcome to Casa de Cambio. On this episode of Casa de Cambio, I am delighted and excited and very thrilled to welcome Alan Herrity, recruiter extraordinaire. Welcome.
Thanks, Tash. I'm really excited to be here. As we discussed earlier, this is my first ever podcast, so I'm really excited to be here and experience being interviewed for a podcast.
I'm so excited to have you as well, and I'm just so pleased that this is I assumed this wouldn't be your first podcast because you're a fellow hustler who's always out there. So this is super exciting and welcome. How has your week been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. I think, we use the word hustle. I'm in hustling mode at the moment. I think I said to you when we were talking a few weeks ago that I quite like it when I think I'm a bit different in this regard. I quite like it when I've got a good balance between a volume of roles to work and time to do business development, because I like the hustle and I like to speak to people and help them with their needs and what have you. And that could be new people who don't know me from a client and candidate perspective, or people that I haven't spoken to for quite some time. I've been in Australia since 2010. So that's 13 years of hustling to build really strong relationships, predominantly here in Melbourne and in Sydney. And, when I'm in a situation where I'm like last year and the year before, where I was just getting a lot of demand, fill this role, and what have you, that first of all, that can, I'm grateful for it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you're just in delivery mode the whole time. You don't have time to hustle. And I do like the hustle. I placed somebody recently at a reputable education organization, one of Australia's leading education organizations, and I met him in 2011.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love to be able to connect with somebody that I haven't spoken to for a long time because they've been busy. I've been busy with some stuff, and two people can only manage the workload that they've got. So I really like the balance between the hustle and the fulfillment.
Yeah.
I think I'm most probably a bit of a rarer and maybe older school recruiter in that regard, given, I'm 47 now, so I've been around for a while. But yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm hustling, working on opportunities in Sydney, working on opportunities here in Melbourne, my hometown, where my wife and children are too. It's been a good week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you say about the balance between your delivery work and your hustling work, because as a business owner, you've got to make sure you've got an eye on your pipeline and what's happening in the future, and you're not solely focused on delivery. But then I've had instances where I've had so much delivery to do. And like you, I think, well, I've got to make hay while the sun shines. I hate having to say no to things. But then I'll get requests from, people in my network saying, hey, could you present at this thing or could you come to this event? And I hate having to turn that stuff down because I'm overloaded. But obviously you have to protect your energy. Yeah. And so it's great when you can get the right mix of the two. Yeah. Because I'm in full-on hustling mode now as well because, I don't know if you know this, but I do my podcast in blocks. Yeah. Because I do get busy. So I'll have a month where I'll really focus hard on the podcast and smash out as many episodes as I can. And then I'll take a break from that. And because, otherwise it's too much work, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I haven't podcasted since I think March. So it's podcasting time now, which is, I think, a form of hustle because you've got to find topics and reach out and, make time to record. And anyway, we'll get into the podcast. Speaking of podcasts, we'll get into the podcast, shall we? So something that's been on my ideas board for a while, actually. Yeah. And again, it came up because we were having a chat last week about something unrelated. And also I met you in 2010. So we've known each other for a while and we kind of come in and out of each other's orbit. Yeah. But we were talking about something unrelated and then you said something and I said, that's on my ideas board. And then we decided, let's do the podcast and here we are. So the idea that I've had for a little while is, what do you do if you're a project manager or a program manager or someone who's looking to hire a change resource but you don't know anything about change and you don't have change resources within your organization that can help you.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get a recruiter on board to help me. And so here we are. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So I've seen, and this is a question that a lot of people have genuinely asked for this to be covered in the podcast.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen. Well, I've heard examples from my project manager and program manager friends where they've gone to market. They didn't quite know what they were looking for because they hadn't had a lot of experience with change. They went and hired someone, and unfortunately that person, didn't really work out that well. And I think because they probably didn't vet them, or they maybe could have vetted them a bit better. So first question, you are somebody who regularly recruits, you recruit change management professionals. Starting at the very beginning, what guidance and tips would you give to project and transformation professionals who are looking to recruit a change resource?
I was thinking about that actually. So I think one of the things that change professionals find challenging is being brought on too late. So the first piece of advice I would is bring the change person on really early. Once you've got the business case approved, bring them on really early so they can help shape that with you, especially if you know nothing about change. If you bring somebody in who can help shape that for you, that'll help you deliver your project or program better, and make sure that they are budgeted for the full duration on the initiative so they can, make sure that the change is embedded into the organization. Another thing that, change practitioners say to me is, I say, how did you go about embedding the change? The organization ran out of funding and I was only there until 2 weeks after the project went live, if it was a technology project or what have you. So do your work up front to make sure and it might be you bring in one person, depending on the size and order of magnitude of the initiative or what have you, but make sure you get that person on board early, have them there for the full duration to make sure from an organizational change perspective that your initiative will be successful. Obviously, speak to an expert recruiter or a consultancy who can give you some advice about how you go about doing that. It's not necessarily about just finding the person. It's about how do you go about doing that. There's something like 9,500 recruitment agencies in Australia. Now, not all of them specialize in, transformation or organizational change management. But I think it's important for organizations to try and understand out who the good people are who understand organizational change, whether it's consultancies or agencies or people who are running their own businesses like yourself. So then those people know what good looks like, and they'll ask you the right questions too to make sure that you're set up for success.
Yeah, a couple of great points in there I want to elaborate on. The first one is, if you're looking for someone 4 weeks before you go live because someone mentioned comms and training, that's a big red flag to a lot of change managers. So you may struggle to attract quality talent because people will be very wary. Well, why have you left it so late?
Absolutely.
Another thing, I would even go so far as to say, get your change professional involved in and make contributions to the business case so that change is correctly funded. Because another bugbear that we constantly deal with is, that wasn't in the business case. And therefore, you just have no budget or that, it was 1/10 of what you need. So you can't actually deliver a high quality change because the budget's not there. So even if, and I know it's probably not feasible to bring on a full-time resource at the stage that you're writing a business case, but I did a piece of work. Well, it should have been more, but all I had available at the beginning of this year was 6 business days. So I did 6 business days statement of work with a client just to do some change management costings and calculations for their business case. So you can go out here if you need, guys, but you can go out and get, an independent consultant to help you with that. And then, they will also guide you on, this is the resource mix that I think you need. I think maybe you need a junior person or you need a change lead and you need an instructional, so they will know based on the project what kind of things you're going to need. Because something that happens a lot is, we don't have budget for that. And another thing is a lot of the change budget, change does ramp up towards the go live the pointy end of the project. So you may have a change lead on their own for a little while. Don't take their budget away and use it for other things because they haven't used it, because they're going to use it on stuff right at the end. Because then you've taken the money away and you've got because you were like, oh, well, you're not, it's like, well, I'm not going to use it because the training, I'm not hiring facilitators until the training happens, or I'm not hiring the instructional designers until we've got all the processes signed off. So that's another one I would say as well.
That's good feedback.
And then when it comes to CVs, because I've seen people, their eyes glaze over when they see a change manager's CV. What should people be looking for in a change professional CV?
Okay. I actually think that rarely do I see a CV, if I'm really honest, which is compelling. And that's not me being disparaging about people or anything like that. Especially in a busy market, people will just send you the CV that they've got. And because they pick up work, irrespective of the compelling nature of their CV or not, they're not, there's no incentive for them to do a compelling CV or document. But I think I told you this last week. An executive said to me about 10 years ago, he said, Alan, you need to help me. I was like, okay, Andrew, what do I need to help you with? And he was like, all of these change practitioners, all their CVs look the same. But it's not only a change thing, it's business analyst land, project management land, program manager land, organizational change land. All the CVs look the same because people get into the habit of writing their roles and responsibilities on their CVs. And it's just a list of tasks. So
and it's rinse and repeat. It's impact assessment, change plan, comms execution.
And they all look the same. You could go and pull like an ad off Seek and copy and paste it into your CV, go CV done. But that is not compelling in any way, shape, or form. So here are a couple of thoughts. So I feel that people tend to talk about roles and responsibilities, not outcomes. I have written in the last 6 months a video on YouTube, which is called Think Outcomes, Not Tasks.
I will include that in the show notes so the listeners can link to it. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I also talk about the first page effect. I think, human nature is people, not everybody, but some people, especially certain people from the book, will get bored when they're reading a document, and their level of detail about when they're reading or the document will wane over time. So I describe that as the first page effect. When I write a summary for a candidate who I'm representing, the thought process I go into is the client should be reading Tasha's summary by Alan. By the time they've read the CV, they go, I want to interview her, before they've even looked at your CV. So what I mean by the first page effect is your first page needs to do that. So that's why I say to people, tables with your career history, accreditations, your degrees and all that sort of thing, they're all brilliant, all absolutely brilliant. And people are really proud of those things and what have you, but they won't really get somebody really bought in. What people are bought into is you. Who are you? What are the value you bring? And what are the business problems that you solve for them? And that's your first page effect. So you need to have a compelling executive summary or profile. On the CV, I look for the types of initiatives that the person's worked on. And, don't get me wrong, I think a really good change practitioner can move from initiative to initiative. But let's say, for example, if you've worked on a risk and compliance initiative and you've worked on, risk and compliance or mergers and acquisitions and what have you, and you've worked in those sort of initiatives, it's easier for you to get up to speed with the organization, and the organization will gravitate towards that. Now, I do educate clients that, it doesn't have to be the change practitioner with the subject matter expertise on every single occasion, because that's a mistake. But in some cases, it does matter. So I do look for similar initiatives so I can go, okay, well, Mr. and Mrs. Client, Tasha's work on these initiatives. This is what she did. This is what this is what she brought. A little bit of color around the size and complexity of those initiatives. Because I want to know that, so then I can tell the story to the client, and the client will want to know that so they can read your story. And then, outcomes. So, I try and put metrics and what that meant to the business on the outcomes. So, I was hired initially as the change manager for one project, but then I became the overall change manager for a program of work and talked about the business benefits to that. I developed the future strategy to support new ways of working and talk about how you help the organization execute that. I developed and deployed the engagement and organizational change approach to new ways of working and talk about how you executed and established the work packages and, all those sort of things. So things like that, but and I know it's harder in organizational change to, put metrics in, because a program manager, they can put how many teams they manage, what was the size of the project in terms of budget, how many users were impacted if it was a technology implementation. So it's a little bit different in change, but where you can talk about what does this mean to the business, try and do that, and also try not talk in change acronyms which mean nothing to somebody who doesn't understand organizational change.
This is great. So there's so much good stuff there. And a couple of things I hard agree. Like you talked about getting clear, if you're hiring a change manager, what is the problem that your change resource is going to solve for you? And I would be looking similarly on a CV for projects that are in a similar wheelhouse. So am I working on an ERP? Oh, this person's done 5 ERPs, and it doesn't matter which system. It doesn't matter if it's or CRM. It doesn't matter if it's Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. If they've done some CRM cloud transformations, this is good. I don't need people to have the exact technical, that's obviously if they do have that, awesome. But I wouldn't count someone out. But I'm looking, and I would also be looking at, for similar projects that I think are going to be the right fit for the project I'm working on. But I'd be very clear on what is the problem that the change manager will be solving, or the change practitioner will be solving, and then looking for evidence of have they solved that problem before at another organization. So another question is, what questions do you recommend people who are not well-versed in change management ask in an interview when they're interviewing a change professional if it's their first time?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I was thinking about this when I was writing my notes. So I did say, and I'm going to say it, but I know you've phrased what the problem statement for the podcast differently. I did say, go and find out where else in the organization they've actually had successful change initiatives, and ask for your peers and the leaders of what happened, who was running it, what were the learns, all of those sort of things. But that might not be possible. So if that's not possible, I'm interested, I would advise that the person who's recruiting to get an understanding of what was the initiative that the change practitioner worked on. What was the role within that initiative? Because it's not always obvious. What did they do from change strategy all the way through to execution? If they were a leadership role, which things did they delegate? I think that, because that tells you a little bit about the person.
That's a good one.
For example, if they delegate the comms, it might be because they don't have time, or it might be because they can do comms, but it's not really, they don't really like it, and that's okay. It's okay. It's not. It's just to understand, where that person's strengths are, and it's not a negative thing. So I think that's a really, really good one as well. Oh, by the way, I should say Kim Delaney taught me that. So that's not mine. It's from Kim Delaney. So that's a really good one. The embedment phase. How did they go about the embedment of the change? I think as I mentioned before, they might not always get to see that, but that's really important. Something from Dr. Jen Fromm and Lena Ross. How do you measure change effectiveness? And it's different if it's a waterfall versus hybrid versus agile.
Yep.
It is different. So how did you go about embedding that change?
Mm-hmm.
And then examples around overcoming resistance. So I was thinking so for example, let's say for example, if you're having a whiteboarding session, right? And I said to you, okay, map out if you're doing this project with me, map out the change journey, how you would do it. And you go, okay, I'll do my, change strategy plan, blah, 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 all the way through. Then you do that. And then I go to you, okay, typically, where do you have problems? Where do you have problems in that change journey? Where do you have resistance? And then talk me through examples of where you've solved those problems.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way in, maybe a bit harder in this virtual world or hybrid world, but in a face-to-face meeting on a whiteboard, the person draws it and then they take me, the person who doesn't understand organizational change, of what the problems are in more serious, and then give me examples of where they've solved those problems historically at company X, Y, and Z. That's a good way of doing it.
So the examples are key. And if I can add to what you said, I would be looking for a technical example. And it comes back to what's the problem? Like, what is the focus of your project, and what are some of the key things that you will be asking the change resource to do? So if it's, you need an impact assessment, I would ask them, talk to me about how you would do an impact assessment, or tell me about a time you did it. And I would be looking for the STAR response. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this took me a really long time to twig. So people were asking me these questions in interviews, and I was like, why are they asking me how to do an impact assessment? Like, it's all over my CV. I'm the impact assessment queen. And I think it was actually Tracy Petrie, hi Tracy, who explained, she's like, they're doing that because so many people brand themselves as change managers, but they can't do impact assessments, or they can't write a change plan. And that's why they're asking these technical and I was like, oh my God. And so now I would say, if your project, if readiness, business readiness is a massive piece, I would ask for an example of, tell me about a time you got the business ready for a big go live. What did you do? And what were the things, and how did it go? And again, like, you don't need to be an expert to hear that example. And using the STAR response is, this is the situation. This is what I did. And this was the result. And then, so I would be thinking about those problems, and then, what are the problems I'm facing? So it could be I'm facing some resistant behaviors, so I need someone to help me with that. So I'm going to ask for an example about that. But I think one trap that I see people fall into is because they don't know the technical stuff, they don't ask a technical question. And then the person gets in and it turns out, they can't do an impact assessment to save their life. And it's taken, they've been there for 6 weeks and they've delivered nothing. So those are important. I think as well, while I've got the mic, it's important to note that, yes, the market fluctuates, but people who are being interviewed by you, like, I always want to know, suss out, is this person a believer in change? Do they value what I do? And I ask them, have you worked with a change manager before? Like, what's your experience with change? So you need to be prepared to be asked those sorts of questions because, it's not the 80s and 90s where everyone's begging for a job. Like, these people, and the top 5 or 10% of candidates are always going to have options no matter what's happening in the market, right?
I agree.
So, you've got to be prepared. And especially if you are new to it, be honest, like, don't lie if you're not sure, but you've got to be prepared for those sorts of questions for people, because another thing to note is the relationship between a change manager and a project manager, or the change lead and the program manager. It's such a crucial relationship. And, if that relationship isn't going well, the project won't go well. So it's really important that you actually like the person that because you're going to be working really closely together.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think it's okay to not know something.
Yeah.
It's okay not to know something. When I first came to Australia, I didn't know what organizational change management was. And then I've been, I think I used to say that I've been whipped into shape by, Dr. Jen, Lena, Kim Delaney, and a few others, Helen Palmer, a few others. So, that's where I, learn. But it's okay not to know, and I think that's important. And the other thing is what you said about, the top 5 to 10% of candidates, in the transformation space. It's well within their rights to talk to who they're interviewing with and go understand what the sponsorship is for this piece of work, and who are the sponsors, and how are they going to approach things. And the other thing about sponsorship is across the change there's going to be moments where it's going to be hard. Well, we can't just go, all right, okay, well, I'm going to throw in the towel now because it's a bit hard. That's the moment where the sponsors need to really lean in and look after their people and make sure that everybody feels supported. Because it's okay to be a leader when it's all jazz hands and happy, but the best leaders will lean in when it's harder and make sure that, everybody's getting the support that they need.
Absolutely. And you can't outsource change leadership and sponsorship. So sponsor has to do that themselves, because a lot of them think they can outsource it to the change manager.
No.
And the change manager can write the talking points and write all the comms, but the sponsor actually has to be the one to stand up and sponsor. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely certain. I've had a conversation with Dr. Jen Fromm about that, where she's, I've worked with her a few times, and she said, I've educated, the person in question that I will help them prepare for all of this and what have you, but it needs to come from them.
Yeah.
Because they're the sponsor.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't lead and execute the change. Yeah. So I think we may have somewhat covered this, but again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who's, new to this and thinking, oh, I really need help. What are some examples of desirable responses from candidates in interviews? I think,
me personally, I'm interested in the person's story. I tend to say to clients, the CV is just one part of the puzzle. So you've got, a CV, what I say verbally, my written summary. You've got people's LinkedIn profiles, you've got references, you've got all these different pieces of data, and we use video. We use video clips on our exclusive roles. I'll talk to you about that maybe another time. So you've got all these different, pieces of data, which tells the person's story. Behind the CV is a person.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in that person's story as much as you can articulate in a well-crafted CV. So the story behind the person, but the story behind the initiatives, to go back to, those examples of, okay, where did you write the, change strategy, the plan and what have you? Okay, walk me through how you did the business impact assessment. How did you go about it? What were the challenges? All of those sort of things. They're the examples or the story like responses are desirable for me. But I have seen, I posted a video a little while ago, because I've done, I think it's 7 or 8 videos on LinkedIn from our YouTube channel on interview preparation. And I've talked about STAR in many different ways. And one particular change practitioner jumped on LinkedIn and said, Alan, I don't like the STAR interview. I think it's really unfair on the candidate. It puts them under pressure. It makes them feel uncomfortable. And sometimes you have to pull out, Dumbledore style, pull out a bit of information just off the top of your head to give an example. I have two schools of thought on that. If I'm being harsh, I'm like, you should be prepared. If you're prepared, you'll be okay.
And also, we're not hiring for like a technical role where your people skills don't matter. Like, this is change management. Yeah. So one of the key things is being able to explain difficult concepts, build relationships.
Yeah.
And, there are some industries and roles where I think it is unfair expecting people to interview well because they could be really introverted but technically savvy. But change isn't that. Change, exactly. Like if you can't interview well, I would question your ability to be a change manager, because so much of the role is using influencing without authority and, building strong stakeholder relationships quickly. So if you can't do that in an interview, yeah.
I agree.
Maybe I'm being harsh.
I look for examples, and I always look for examples. Now, if I'm interviewing somebody and I look for examples and I don't get examples, I might say to them, okay, your example there wasn't quite what I'm looking for. Can you walk me through how you would do this?
Yeah, give them a second chance. And, another thing that you said was be prepared, right? So I think if you're on the hiring end, make it as easy, like help the person prepare by writing as detailed a job description or key selection criteria as you can. Because again, when I've been a candidate, I've seen so many like dud basic copy paster job, descriptions that tells me absolutely nothing about the project or the person they're looking for. It just states a list of, basic standard things a change manager would do. So if you are working on a merger, say, or if it's like a tech integration, like put as much info as you can. So then the candidate, because again, when I'm preparing, I will go to the key selection criteria or the job description I've been given, and I'll look through and I'll prepare examples and I'll think of examples based on that. So I think the best thing you can do is give as much information about what the project is and what are the key things you're going to be asking that resource to do. So then they have the opportunity to prepare. And then if they don't, it's on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing is, organizations tend to have those generic position descriptions because sometimes it's down to how they grade their roles. For permanent roles, they have key success criteria, what have you, but they don't always have, the exit initiative. So when I'm working on a role with a candidate, I will have the client's position description and I'll say to them, read through that. But also equally importantly, or more importantly, to be honest, is read through my notes, what the clients told me about this opportunity, because it's all of that stuff, which is the real rich content, which is really important. So that's what I do when I'm preparing candidates.
Yes. And what we haven't said, we've been talking for ages and we haven't got there. Work with a specialist recruiter because they will help you. They will help you find the appropriate candidates, people like you, people like Tracy, who we've mentioned. There are a lot of people who or even at the really big, recruitment companies, they have a change division and someone is in charge. So they know who's on the market. They know which candidates are good. They know who's got a bit of a question mark over their name. They know who's looking. Like they will give you a short list of excellent people within a couple of days. So you don't have to go through these CVs yourself. And and then also they will, if you are bound by a generic JD because of role bandings and processes and whatnot, you then can give that recruiter a lot of additional information to help get the best candidate, and also the best candidate can prepare for your interview. So I can't believe we've got that far into the interview and didn't say use a specialist recruiter. They will really help you out.
I think it's hard for talent acquisition teams as well, because, in the current marketplace, it's normal that organizations are looking for BAs themselves, project managers themselves, program managers themselves, organizational change specialists themselves, to name a few roles, because it's obviously cost effective and they don't want to, use agencies. They might be reducing their talent acquisition team. So, those teams need to, justify their roles within the organization, and that's absolutely fine. The challenge is for a talent acquisition person, not all of them, but if I'm a talent acquisition person, I've got quite a few friends in talent acquisition, and I'm working a head of marketing role, and then 2 days later I'm working an organizational change specialist role. It's completely impossible. No matter how good you are as a talent acquisition person, you will have worked certain areas within talent acquisition and you'll get good at certain areas. But all of a sudden, if you're all of a sudden into organizational change, and then you advertise this role, and then you see all these CVs who all look the same, how do you know what good looks like? With the greatest respect, and I'm not being disparaging at all about, a talent acquisition friends, but how do they know what good looks like? And
because they're not industry experts and they're not taking the time to learn about change.
And they're great at what they do, don't get me wrong, but that's the challenge. And then, you speak to the client and you go, we hired these people and they were rubbish. Well, that's flawed from the outset, where you've got to make sure use your talent acquisition team for X amount of the roles. It might be 95% of the roles, but make sure you use the specialists for the specialist roles. And they could say, oh well, every recruitment agency with every specialism will say that to us. Well, then that's where you need to decide as a talent team which of the roles we can really cover and do a real proper job on and know what good looks like, because otherwise it's going to unravel.
Yeah.
And ultimately cost the organization more money.
And another thing around, because I have been in that situation before where I have been hiring and I would have loved to have the luxury of working with a specialized change management recruiter. It would have made my life so much easier. But, I wasn't allowed to because of cost. And, so we had to go through the internal team who don't have specialist knowledge about change, but their process also is, are we going to put an ad up on Seek and see who applies? And I'm like, again, the best people do not look at Seek. They get tapped on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then, again, like I'm seeing CVs, and even in some of that was during, 2020 when the market was really slow. And I'm looking at CVs going, you can't tell me these are the best people that are on the market. So it also is, they have the relationships.
Yeah.
So they know who's looking without, because so many people are just not going to, because again, like we talked about this last week, like applying for jobs, if you're a job seeker, applying for jobs on Seek is actually, it's got a very low ROI on your time.
Yeah. Yes. It's like, when I first set the business up 10 years ago, I decided not to advertise on Seek. I've never advertised on Seek in 10 years. Did do some advertising on LinkedIn earlier on, but haven't advertised for about 5 years. We call it our network solution. So that means every single time I have a role, I place somebody like you who I know, a referral if you're not available because you referred somebody to me. We've got an extensive database, which is, to be honest with you, too big for me to keep up with, because I'm effectively a one-man team in terms of the sales and delivery. But we've got a great database, with some really good people on there, especially in Melbourne and Sydney. And I do not regret in any way, shape, or form the decision to not advertise. I will have lost out on some good candidates here and there, absolutely. But in any marketplace, I want to be able to de-risk the client's recruiting process by saying, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, I've got this lady, Tash. She can do X, Y, and Z for you. She's done A, B, C at these organizations, known her since 2010. She's a gun. Suggest you meet with her, Monday, 10 o'clock, whatever.
Oh, keep talking. I love this.
And that will de-risk the recruitment process of the organization. And the other thing is, in this market, and one of the other reasons I decided not to advertise, I did not want, and don't get me wrong, I've got some LinkedIn messages in my LinkedIn inbox now that I need to get back to some people. And I'll get back to everybody, right? But I did not want to be the guy who advertises an organizational change manager role or a project manager role on Seek or LinkedIn or what have you, have 300 applicants and not be able to get back to all of them. So there's a thing where they call it circle back initiative, where people say we'll get back to every single candidate. But if I got back to 300 candidates, I wouldn't make any placements. So I decided not to advertise, because it's better that I speak to 60 people to get to a list of 5 or 3 or whatever number it is I send to the customer. It wouldn't be 5 on a contract role, be between 3 and 5 on a permanent role, depending on it is. But it's better that I'm in control of who I speak to and de-risk the client's process than having lots of people come into me, because I've got a fairly decent social media profile, if you want to call it. So people contact me anyway. And I want to give those people a good service, even if it's based on, I don't have anything for you right now, let's keep in touch. When I talked a little bit about the overwhelm earlier, I would be absolutely overwhelmed if I advertised. For organizations and recruitment agencies, do it. I talent acquisition is a bit harder because they don't always have the money and the funding to have the tools and what have you to do search. So, and I'm respectful of that. And, that's not necessarily their fault. It's the organization who should invest in that. But recruitment agencies in this day and age, they should be teaching their recruiters from the very, very start how to build relationships and how to build what they call their desk from scratch. The starting point is the database, because there'll be people on there, and build relationships and referrals and what have you, and not think every single time they get a role, let's put an advertisement up. Now, if somebody from other people from the recruitment industry see that I've just said that, they're like, oh, that's rubbish, Alan, you have to advertise anything. Well, I've been trading for 10 years and I've never, ever.
Yeah, look at you. You're going strong, right?
Yeah. And it's a complete waste of time. You can,
and I really hear
if you want to.
No, I really hear what you're saying about, especially when you're one person. Like maybe if you've got teams of admin people to deal with, but we know that they don't, because that is one of the downfalls of using Seek to find work, is you apply for stuff and you just never hear anything. It goes into a void, or you might get a generic "Dear John," email. Which might be the best that you can get. It's very rare that you actually get an interview, let alone a job out of it.
Yeah.
And another thing I was going to say is, I have had when, the example I gave before about, I had to go through internal and, there was a job posted on Seek. So of course I posted the job on LinkedIn saying, hey, we're hiring, we've got a great team, yada, yada, yada. Had to put a note saying, I'm not the hiring manager. Like, yes, I was participating, but, technically my boss, the head of change, was the hiring manager, because I didn't want to get inundated with people asking, can we have a call about the role? But it still happened. RIP my LinkedIn DMs, because I'm a senior change manager on a really busy project who's in back-to-back meetings all day and doing my work outside of work hours, right? And then now I've got 100 people in my DM saying, oh, could we have a chat about the role? I'm like, no, you need to apply for it. Like I can't chat with all of you. Like you've just got to apply. And then we will vet you. And if your CV is not good enough, because it's like, I don't know you. If it was someone I knew really well and I already thought this person's a gun, yes, I'd probably give them 30 minutes if I really wanted to get them on my team. But if I don't and I don't want people to think I'm being rude, but I just don't, I do not have the capacity to make 100 phone calls and talk about one role when we've already got a stream of applicants coming in,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, if we work from, in the older days, people used to, apply for jobs via print media, and then obviously, digital world changed things forever. And I wrote a blog years ago. It might not even be on our website now because we're in the midst of doing a new website, but it was called One Click Recruitment. So basically people can click one click reply now. And the thing is about One Click Recruitment, I was saying that, people can apply really quickly, but it's so easy to throw your hat into the ring for a role that you're not qualified for. It'll take me five minutes, bunk. And so that's part of the problem. People apply for roles and they're not suitable for those roles, with the greatest respect. The other problem is the ghosting. They don't get anything back from the organizations. It must be so much hard work, emotionally draining, not good for your self-esteem and your confidence and stuff like that. There are better ways. In my humble opinion, the best organizations out there who hire have talent acquisition teams who do a lot of direct search themselves, and know when to use agencies for specialized roles, and what have you. Because advertisement, it's almost like vanity. It's like, hey, it's like the marketing. Hey, we're hiring, and then when people apply, and then they get nothing back,
and we're going to give you a terrible experience.
Yeah, that whole candidate experience thing is absolutely broken in a lot of organizations.
Yeah. And I think that, again, that's where the recruiter experience, because the recruiters who are, I'm going to cough, the recruiters who are the best recruiters, they get the best candidates because they treat the candidates with respect.
Of course.
So again, when I was, contracting, I had a list of recruiters, and there were certain recruiters who I would be the first. I would go to them first when I was looking, because I liked them the best. They fought for candidates and they had the best roles. And then there were the ones that, I didn't, they were okay, but they were on the panel. They were big recruiters and on the panel for a lot of places. So they had a lot of work. And then there's one or two that I just didn't like dealing with. So I only went to them if I was like really desperate, which was never. So you got to think about that too. But this has been a great chat, but I'm going to bring us back to back to the podcast topic, because we're having a quite interesting general chit chat about recruitment in general. But I think this is all good info for someone who was looking, because this is what's happening in the industry and this is what we're talking about. Last question before we wrap up. Are there any more gotchas or traps for new players, for people stepping into this space, that they should be aware of?
I'll try not to talk about Star because we covered that a little bit. And I know you've talked about
I covered it in a previous podcast episode.
Yeah, so that's cool. I think, I said, I think it's really important just to articulate what you've done with examples and align that to the organization's problem, like you mentioned. And, and if they can't do that, talk through how would they set up the change initiative success? What are the steps that they go through? Where they expect to see resistance and how will they address this? What are the challenges? And how have they influenced? Because I think, change management is such an influencer role. It's such an influencer role. Unless you're, a head of change or what have you, you might not have anybody reporting into you. So you've got to get things done without any authority.
Correct. You don't have, without using your position in the hierarchy, because you're usually trying to get people who sit above you in the formal hierarchy to do stuff.
So it's such an influencer role, be able to influence the program director, the program manager, the senior management, the executives, the people who don't want to change, all that sort of thing. So I always really look for that. And it's not that the person needs to be an extrovert to be, an influencer. It's not about that at all. But how has that person gone about around influencing people? Or what are the examples of doing that? Where have they done that well? That's, for me, one of the key, standout points about the best change practitioners.
I think one for me is I'm all for training and continuous learning, but I don't think certifications, I went to say certs, but you said don't use jargon, certifications. I don't think just because someone's got a particular certification, it is a rubber stamp that they are an amazing change manager. So I wouldn't confuse certification with quality and excellence. But then the converse of that is, when I do look through CVs, like you said, like if I get to the back, I'm like, oh, they've got this and that. But I would want to see if someone's been in change for maybe more than 5 years and they hadn't gone and done some form of formal training, that would be a question. I'd be like, oh, why haven't you done anything, So it's not mandatory. Like, I still hire people, especially at the more junior levels. I want to see the experience and, the value that you've added. But, don't make the mistake, because I know certs are massive in project management world, and people want to know, do you have PMI, PMBOK, Prince 2? I think it's probably more of a nice to have in change. So I wouldn't block someone or not hire them just because they didn't have a particular type of certification I wanted to see.
Yeah, I think when you see the advertisements on Seek and what have you, I think organizations put in those certifications because it's a way of filtering out people. And it's also like your crux to hold on to, or something to your anchor to go, well, actually, I've filtered those people. They've got the certifications. Again, to me, it goes back to the piece of the puzzle. There's many pieces of the puzzle to find the right candidate for that organization. Certifications is one, but it's like, I wouldn't make a decision to hire a candidate for an executive role just based on the psychometric test, unless it was a really bad one. It's pieces of the puzzle, and you need to bring all of the pieces of the puzzle together and go, right, does the sum of the parts, is that the person that we want? So certifications for me are pieces of the puzzle rather than the be all and end all. And I'm like you, I go, okay, this person's got these certifications, that's great, but how do you use them in practice? Because I'm done the PCI course in 2013. I've done it, It was really great learning experience. That was 10 years ago. I can't do what you do.
Yeah. Would you go out and get a job as a change manager today because you did that? Not sure. Yeah.
Well, no, mate, most probably not.
But some people will be presenting themselves that way, though. I've seen that people go, oh, well, you know, I did a pro sci, even though they're a project manager and they've never worked as a change manager. And I'm like, not sure I'm going to be the one to give you that chance. So there is a lot of that. Where can people get more Alan?
I'm obviously on LinkedIn a lot.
Yes.
I just say, you know, I'm slower to respond when people direct message me on LinkedIn. So I do get back to everybody. It just takes me a little bit longer. Sort of emails and, you know, so email me, LinkedIn. We have a YouTube page, which I'd love people to subscribe to it. It's got 142 videos and 13 playlists on it.
And they're very helpful videos on everything from how to present your CV to how to do an interview. So I'll include it in the show notes, but I strongly recommend the listeners get onto it because, again, it's a lot of super valuable free content. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. And, you know, that's why I built it. You know, the market changed in the beginning of the pandemic. And, you know, we didn't have a great year either. That's 2020. And I just thought, how can I make a difference here? So I started doing the videos. And some of the videos are a little bit rough and ready. You know, if I've got 142 videos there, that's most probably 500 takes over time or something like that. So I've got better at it over time. You know, I'm not the panacea of all things, but hopefully, you know, that free content will help people. And there's a lot of content there, which that was the whole idea. So as many subscribers as we can, really, that will help people. And, you know, it means that if they don't necessarily speak to me initially, you know, they get that content. We are finally going to refresh our website. So 10 years ago, I did our first website, which is a WordPress website. Yeah. Tasha, I have no idea how I managed to do that because there's no way I'd be able to do it now. It just boggles my mind I managed to do it.
I built my own website too. And every time I have to go back and do a new thing, I'm like, oh, how do I do this again?
Yeah, exactly. So we got another guy who's no longer in the industry. He did another website for us, and that was before the pandemic, but it's time. It's time. So we are a couple of weeks away from going to market with a new website.
Exciting.
Yeah, which is quite exciting actually. And my brother works with our business, so we're using a company who's doing that. They specialize in recruitment websites, but the heavy lifting in the background is done my brother Brian. So he lives in Dundee in Scotland, but he does all of the posts that go on LinkedIn, all of the subtitling of my videos, all that sort of. He does all of that.
That's a real family affair.
Yeah, no, he does the marketing on our marketing platform. He's done the heavy lifting on this website project, and, you know, making sure we get that fit for purpose. So we'll get there. But my final point is the quickest way to get me, and I really prefer this, and it's just the way I work. I'm respectful of other people's way of working. Is just call me.
Yeah,
call me on the mobile. I will get back to people within 48 hours unless I'm on leave. Somebody said to me today, I'm disillusioned with the recruitment industry, Alan, because people put out advertisements and you don't even know now who the person is you're supposed to contact. So you send your CV and it goes into a black hole.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't advertise. But secondly, I'm in the people business. So call me. If I don't have something for you, I'll tell you. If I have something in the pipeline, I'll tell you. I'll try and help as many people as I can. And yeah, so, you know, they're the different channels, of course, but phone is still my preferred because it's just the way I operate, I suppose.
Okay, so LinkedIn, YouTube, website, telephone.
Yeah, telephone. And you can send me an email, but I'll be slower on the LinkedIn messages and the emails because I get
that makes sense because you get so many. Yeah.
But I will get back to people. I promise.
Amazing. Well, Alan, this has been we've covered a lot of ground here, a lot more than I thought we would. And this has been an excellent conversation. You have been so generous with all of your knowledge and insights on how to recruit and also how to be recruited and how to network. So thank you so much for being a guest on Casa de Cambio podcast.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah, it's been fun. And for the listeners, we'll be back soon with more content. And don't forget to write a review if you listen on Apple Podcasts. Bye-bye.